a little tutorial to go through some of the patterns that we see in what's called stellar evolution, so the lifetimes of stars. Some information to start off with. So main sequence stars, so those are stars that are fusing hydrogen to helium in their cores. So main sequence stars that can no longer support nuclear fusion of hydrogen in their cores will become red giant stars. Although most main sequence stars become red giants, their specific evolutionary paths after this red giant phase vary greatly, depending on mass. A low mass star less than about 8 times the mass of the Sun, so less than 8 times the solar mass, eventually ejects the outer layers to produce a planetary nebula. The stellar core remaining in the middle of the planetary nebula is called a white dwarf. Basically, it's the inert elements that star was never hot enough to fuse into heavier elements. In contrast, high mass star, more than 8 times the mass of the Sun, will eventually explode as a type 2 supernova. Depending on the original mass of the star, the type 2 supernova will leave behind either a neutron star, or if its original star was extremely massive, a black hole. And a little bit of wording. So type 2 supernova. In your textbook that we're using for this class, that is called a massive star supernova. One of the 2 types of supernova as conceived of in your book. Alright, we want to use the information above and the word list below to fill in the ovals in the diagram on the next page. Be sure to look at the arrows and words between the ovals to make sure these links between the ovals make sense. Alright, so let's see how these different words fit in. I have a red giant with small mass, so less than 8 solar mass. That red giant is going to produce a planetary nebula. The envelope of the star is ejected, and then what is left behind, the center of the planetary nebula, is an inert white dwarf. Alright. A red giant with a large mass, more than 8 solar masses, is going to produce this term, the type 2 supernova, or a massive star supernova. And that could leave behind either a neutron star or a black hole, if the star was massive enough. Or there are some other situations, not necessarily just mass. Okay. The diagram does not give all the information known about the death of stars. Fair, it's like 5 ovals. Since it is incomplete, we can always add to this diagram as we learn more information. Parts A and B below, you're given some additional information about the end states of stars. Your task is to change or add to the diagram to incorporate this additional information. Note, there are several ways to accomplish this. Alright, so if a white dwarf has a nearby binary companion star, it can gravitationally attract material from its companion in a process known as accretion. When the white dwarf accretes enough material from the companion, the white dwarf will either 1. Blow off the outer layers of accreted material in a controlled fusion reaction known as a nova, leaving behind the white dwarf unchanged, or 2. Experience a violent, uncontrolled fusion reaction that causes the white dwarf and accreted material to explode is a type 1a supernova, destroying the white dwarf and leaving nothing behind. Alright, so type 1a supernova is not a term in your book. In your book, that is referred to as a white dwarf supernova. Your book doesn't make the distinctions between type 2 and type 1a, type 1b, type 1c, or plateau, or other types of supernovae. In the context of your textbook, it's either a massive star supernova or you've pushed a white dwarf over the white dwarf limit, or the Chandrasekhar limit. Alright, so if I have a white dwarf, we can fill in a little bit more of its stellar evolution. If that white dwarf is accreting in a close binary, that could build up enough material for the white dwarf to have a nova. And we also know if the mass of that white dwarf gets pushed beyond the stability limit, so the mass exceeds 1.4 times the mass of the sun, instead of being a nova, we could have a white dwarf supernova, and that leaves no compact object behind. The white dwarf is incinerated. Alright, let's go back and take care of part B. Completely by itself in space, a black hole can be nearly impossible to detect. However, if a black hole has a nearby binary companion, the strong gravitational pull of the black hole can gravitationally attract material from its companion in a process known as accretion. This material then spirals around the black hole and increases in temperature. This process causes the rapidly moving material to emit large amounts of X-ray radiation, which we can detect with X-ray telescopes. Thus, one way to look for black holes is to look for strong X-ray sources. So for a black hole, if a black hole is accreting in a close binary, what will you detect? You will detect what's called an X-ray binary. So I realize it's not part of the worksheet, but it is also true that a neutron star accreting in a close binary will also appear as an X-ray binary. And so that's one of the challenges, is to try to use basically Kepler's third law for the motion in that binary to determine if the unseen object has a mass that could correspond to a neutron star, which is about 3 times the mass of the sun or less, or if it exceeds that mass limit, the unseen object will be a black hole. And in both these cases, the object is unseen because it's tiny. Solar mass neutron star is going to have a radius of about 10 kilometers. Black hole will have a radius smaller than that. We'll work out the Schwarzschild radius for a black hole later. But both of those are absolutely tiny. Doesn't matter how hot the surface of a neutron star would be. It would be very hard to detect that amount of light because the object is itself so small.